Hello once again, Stopping Socialism TV viewers. We've got part 2 coming at you about our Rasmussen poll that we conducted over the last couple of weeks. And the results that we're going to get into today are focused mainly on police shootings, which is a topic that is in the news constantly, seemingly, lately. So we're going to get into those results, and just like the climate change one, if you have not watched that video, you have to check it out. We go into depth and kind of the context of the poll a little bit more than we're probably going to do on this video. So if you really want the kind of the background on what we've done with this poll over the last couple of weeks, you're going to want to check that out. But before we get into these results, I of course have to ask you if you want to help us get this content out there, if you want to help spread the message around of stopping socialism, you have to hit that like button. You have to subscribe to this channel. You have to share this content. Is the only way for us to kind of break through that algorithm. The YouTubes, the Googles, and the Facebooks of the world would rather us not be seen by anybody. So it is up to you to help us. And like I said, hit those buttons. Share this content. It's the only way to get this message out to more people. And it's free. So you can do that and help us out. So Justin, this is part 2 of the Heartland Rasmussen poll. As you described in the last video, this is a poll that we conducted that basically tried to, it asked a bunch of questions about media preferences, what channels you tend to watch, how much media you consume of those channels, and then it also asks you a bunch of factual questions and tries to determine basically how correct or wrong you are, and then correlating that to your media consumption preferences. So that's kind of the real bare bones. Like I said, if you want a more in-depth explanation of what our poll is, go check out the other video, part 1 of the series. But this one, I want to focus on the unarmed police shootings questions here. But before I read the specific ones, is there anything you want to add?
Nope. I think you did a nice job laying that out. So well done.
Thank you so much.
Well done. I know I know. I can tell you're shocked, and I understand why. But yeah, no, you did a great job.
Is this just the 2 questions you want to get into in this one? Is that how we broke it up?
Well, so in the way that we published the Rasmussen poll, there were 2 other questions related to in this group. There were 2 questions related to unarmed police. Fatal police shootings, and then there were 2 questions about homicides related to rifles, including assault rifles. But I think we should probably just stick with the police shootings question for this video, and we can maybe get into the assault rifle question or the rifle question in the other video where we deal with a hodgepodge of different topics.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
That works for me, sir. All right. So the two questions that we have are pretty identical. The first one is approximately how many unarmed African Americans were fatally shot by police in 2020? The options were less than 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 500, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, or more than 10,000. Question 2 is approximately how many unarmed white Americans were fatally shot by police in 2020? Same options. Less than 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 500, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, or north of 10,000. So
this is just in 2020. Keep in mind,
just 1 year, yes.
Yep.
And as we described in the last video, the questions that we asked to basically see, how the media that they consume affected their view in reality. These are not opinion-based questions. These are facts. We know the answers to these questions, and we are trying to see how on target the people answering this poll are. So, do you want to start off with the first one about how many unarmed African Americans were fatally shot?
Let's start. Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Essentially, really, we could do them both at the same time. In that sense, the correct answer to the question is less than 50. Right. If you go to the Washington Post database, they have a fantastic database where they keep track of fatal police shootings that occur across the country. They've been doing it for several years, or they have several years of data anyway. And the answer for African Americans, according to the Washington Post, which of course is a crazy right-wing propaganda outlet, I know.
You can't even jokingly say that, because according to this poll, a lot of people think that the average media out there is conservative leaning.
It's true. It's true. It should be a video all in of itself, probably. But Washington Post, obviously very left-leaning outlet. It was 18 is the answer according to the Washington Post for unarmed African Americans fatally shot by police in 2020. 18. It's slightly higher. It's in the mid 20s, I think, if you add in people who had toy guns on them, which or BB guns, which I don't think should count, because I think in those cases it's reasonable to assume that the police thought they were real guns in these instances. So, but this is 18 unarmed police shootings. Keep in mind also, this is important for people to keep in mind, when they hear unarmed shooting, they automatically assume that it's unjustified. And in some cases that may be true. In other cases, it might be that police were actually being attacked, and the people who were doing the attacking just didn't have a gun on them or something. Sure. But that doesn't mean that they weren't doing something wrong, of course. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as well. So anyway, the answer is 18 for African Americans, and the answer for white Americans is also less than 50. It was, I think the raw number, which I don't have in front of me, was in the mid 20s. So there are actually more white people who were killed every year by police, fatally shot by police, than there are African Americans. That's not a huge surprise, given the fact that African Americans make up a much smaller proportion of the overall population than white people. But many people who answered the survey question didn't necessarily pick up on that and believe that African Americans are being wildly disproportionately targeted and fatally murdered, or killed anyway, by police at rates that are incredibly devoid of reality. And so again, this is another one of those questions where, depending on where you're getting your news and how you get your news, your answer is going to vary substantially, and in some cases be totally wrong, because that's the impression you're getting from the news. So do you want to go through some of the specific results?
Yeah. I mean, this might be the question out of there might be another one out there, but this might be the question where there was like the biggest difference between the Fox News viewers and the CNN and MSNBC viewers. So the portion that got it right of Fox News was 60%. Not bad, Fox News viewers. And if you add the next level down, which is the 50 to 100 range, that's an additional 18 percentage points. So in those first two, the correct answer in that next level up is 78%. Pretty respectable. Not bad at all. Let's compare that to CNN. 23% got that question right. 23. Less than a quarter. That is wildly failing grade. That's like very bad. If you include the next level up, which I did with Fox News, that's an additional 27 percentage points. So CNN got a 50%, which is a fail. That is an F grade there. MSNBC was actually worse when it came to the correct answer. Only 19% got it correct. So that's less than 1 in 5 got that answer correct. If you include the next level up, they're also at 50%. So that's kind of like the right answer and the respectable range, kind of the answers there. But very similar to some of the other results that we went over in the last video. The viewers that were more likely to get it right is the Fox News, the people that chose another station that they get their news from, and the people that don't watch any of it, which I think is one of my favorite results out of any of these polls, that the people that don't watch are more informed on these topics than the people that regularly watch CNN and MSNBC.
Yeah, the people who said they don't watch cable news were more than twice as likely to get the answer right compared to MSNBC. So
more than twice.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. ABC, in case you were wondering about the big three television news networks, ABC, it was 30% got it right, CBS 26%, NBC 24%. So they outperformed CNN and MSNBC, but only by a little bit in the case of CBS and NBC. ABC was the best of the three, but still half of what Fox News' answer was, and close to half for those who chose another network. So that's your Blaze and Newsmax and OAN and those kinds of networks would fall into that other category. So a pretty remarkable gap here. I mean, without a doubt. But not only is it important in the sense that, well, they're overestimating it, right? Because we said 23%, or in the case of MSNBC, for example, 19% got the answer right, which means 81% got it wrong, right? But it's not just that 81% got it wrong, it's that a large proportion of them, in fact, 50% of them 50%. Got it very, very wrong.
Grossly overestimated.
31% of MSNBC viewers said 100 to 500. And then another 19% said between 500 and 10,000 a year. And so when you add those two numbers together, you get 50%. That's 50% of MSNBC viewers think at least 100 unarmed African Americans are fatally shot by police every year.
So if you do the math on that, we're talking 1 to 2 every day. Like, that's the reality that they're living in. And
again, the answer is 18. So keep that in mind. The answer is 18, and these people are saying at least 100.
But like I said in the climate change thing, it's like, we're living in different realities here. Like the people on the left and people on the right living in different realities. If you are operating, if you're voting for politicians, you're putting support behind policy prescriptions, and your worldview is that in mass thousands of unarmed black men are being shot by police every year. Like, of course, that's going to affect how you, your support levels of these different various things. Like, of course, that's going to happen.
Right. ABC, the answer was 23% of people who said ABC was their favorite network news outlet. 23% said at least 500 unarmed African Americans are killed. At least 500.
About a quarter.
That's 500 a year. So if you spread that out over 10 years, that's 5,000 minimum. That's the bottom. 5,000 at the bottom. And then 10% of ABC viewers, actually 11% of ABC viewers said at least 1,000. At least 1,000. Again, the answer is 18. So 11% of ABC viewers said at least 1,000. 5% said at least 5,000. A year. That means that they think that 50,000 African Americans, unarmed African Americans, are killed every decade. That is insane. It's insane.
Yeah. And let me just put this little note here for anyone that's watching this and thinks that we're callous about any of these topics. Any one of these things is a tragedy for the family involved, surely, especially if it's the most uncalled for, use of force that you can imagine, which surely there's, some of them are. That's I don't laugh that off. That is a terrible thing that should never happen. If the police are in the wrong, they should be held accountable, of course. But when you have an audience of a major news network that is off by a factor of 1,000 of reality, that is a problem. That is a problem. So that is problem. And that is what, this poll, when we had a hypothesis that this would be the case, clearly shows. This is proof of this.
Yes, and it's about 10% across the board. CBS was 10%, CNN was 10%, MSNBC was 9%, who said at least 1,000. So 1 out of 10 of the viewers of these networks think at least 1,000 African Americans. Again, the answer is 18. And it's at least 1,000. So it could be 5,000 in their minds. So again, yeah, as Donnie just said, I mean, anytime this happens, it is a tragedy and it's awful. And there are things that can be done to help mitigate these issues. There are, Donnie and I both believe in police reform. We're actually very libertarian people, and there are lots of libertarians who care about police reform, believe me. In fact, libertarians on average probably care more about police reform than any other demographic of people. Right. So, I mean, we're all for reasonable police reform, but this kind of detachment from reality is that can't be an accident. It can't be an accident. There's a reason why the people who watch all of these networks are getting the idea that the number is 500 or more, when in reality it's 18. Well, and it can't be because MSNBC and CNN are saying it's 1,000 a year when it's really not. I don't believe that that's what's happening at all. I think it's that they're giving the perception that that's what's going on by just covering it in the way that they do, and not giving people the real number. If you gave people the real number, it puts all of this in the proper context, and that's always important. It's always important to give people factual information, and that's not happening at these networks.
Let me ask you a non-philosophical question. What is the point of a news network?
The point of a news network, well, it depends on how you want to answer that question, I guess, right? What perspective you're talking about.
Just the down point to the core.
Ideally, the point of a news network should be to inform people, the public, what is happening in the world, objectively.
I will give you a 100% answer with that. These results show unequivocally that these major news networks, the CNNs and the MSNBCs, are failures when it comes to that. Presenting reality for their audience. They are failing. They are failing. Now, if they want to blame their audience for like misinterpreting what they said, because they're not reporting that, 5,000 unarmed black people are being shot every year. They're not reporting that. So if they want to blame their audience, that's one thing. But yeah, like you were saying, like this is the message that their audience is receiving, in one way or other. And that to me is indicative of a failure on CNN and MSNBC's part.
Right. Now, we should go into the unarmed white Americans fatally shot as well before we close out.
Well, this is interesting. This is an interesting one, because if you were to just look at this one in a vacuum, I think you might be a little bit like taken back by this. But you go ahead. I heard you talking about this. You could probably explain a little more concisely than I can.
Right. So if you just look at unarmed white Americans and you ask the people who are most likely to get this question right, this is one of the few questions where Fox News and other viewers didn't beat out the liberal networks. CNN viewers were the ones most likely to get this question right. MSNBC and ABC were tied for second place with 38%, CBS, NBC 35%, and let's see, other was 33, don't watch was 32, Fox News was only 27%. So they were pretty far off on this one. The answer, of course, was again less than 50 was the right answer. Now, when you actually start adding together the other numbers, the next closest category, 50 to 100, the numbers get closer. So CNN was 67%, for example, and Fox News was 65%.
Very close.
So Fox News is very, very close. So they're not that far off. But what is important to keep in mind is that even though the left-leaning networks were far more likely to get the answer right for white Americans, they were also, as we just said, far more likely to get the answer wildly wrong for African Americans. So what that means is that the gap between the number of unarmed white people being shot and the number or fatally killed by police and the number of unarmed African Americans being fatally killed by police in the minds of the average CNN viewer and MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC is much greater and therefore much more incorrect than the average viewer who watches Fox News, another network, or doesn't watch the news. In other words, Fox News viewers and viewers of other networks and those who don't watch the news are more likely to understand that the gap between the number of unarmed African Americans killed by police and the number of unarmed white people killed by police is actually very close. There really isn't a large gap between these things. It's in the single digits some years. So in some sense, the CNN viewers got it right, but that's only part of the story. In reality, the overall picture is they got it way off. And they actually thought, there are many people who responded to this poll who believed that there were more African Americans killed, unarmed African Americans killed by police every year than white people, when in reality there are more white people killed than African Americans. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, we're not there's all sorts of things you can get into when talking about, well, the size of the demographics. African Americans are a lot smaller group. Therefore, on average, relative, there's all sorts of things we could get into that, but that's not the point of the video. The point is, people don't know the numbers who watch CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS and NBC. They think there is a gigantic gap where African Americans are being targeted at a much higher rate than they actually are by police. And that's not because we think that CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS and NBC are out there giving people the wrong numbers. We think it's because it's the perception, it's the narrative, it's the way they tell the story. It makes it seem like there's a small number of white people get killed by police and there's this massive number of black people who are killed by police. Right. When in reality, it's a small number for both of them. There aren't that many people killed, unarmed people killed by police every year. There just aren't. Right. And again, that doesn't mean that in those individual instances that the police did the right thing every time. That's not what we're saying. But it is important to understand the context and understand the numbers, because that gives you a proper framework through which you can look at all of these issues and really understand the extent to which this is a serious problem. Because if I believed, and I know you feel the same way, if I actually thought that 5,000 African Americans every decade were being murdered by police unarmed, and that there were only tiny fraction of white people who are killed by police every decade, I would think there is a massive, massive problem and something needs to be done immediately to stop this. And we need to blow up the whole system and reform it, because that is clearly something horrible is happening there. And that's what many of these people believe, even though that's not true. That's not reality. Yeah. And I think that's the big takeaway from these two questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I said with the climate change video, you can go into the video description. You can find the link that will take you to the article that kind of goes over some of the main bullet points of this. But included in that article will be a link where you could actually get the cross tabs of all of the information about this. You can look at all the different demographic questions and kind of see if there's anything else that's interesting that sticks out to you. I know that we focus primarily on just like the media consumption, what's your favorite news source, all of that. But there's a lot more questions you can drill down into. And if you find anything particularly interesting, feel free to leave a comment and we'll make sure to check those out. For example, as you were talking, I was looking for like the lowest number that got the question right about unarmed African Americans fatally shot by police in 2020. MSNBC was tied for worst with this other demographic. Do you know what it is, Justin?
Liberals.
Very close. Liberals actually got 20% to MSNBC's 19%. The tied for worst was people that strongly approve of Joe Biden as president. Wildly off when it comes to this question. Yeah, so you can see that. You could check out, it's got college degrees, it's got income levels, it's got marital status, all of these breakdowns if you're interested, conservative, liberal, what party affiliation, all of that stuff. You could check that out in the show notes. Justin, is there any other tidbits you want to add to this before we close out the segment?
No, I don't think there is, other than, well, you know what? There is one thing. It's important, I think, for everybody, regardless of where you fall in the political spectrum, to read the news and watch the news of people that don't share your beliefs. Because one of the big takeaways from this survey is that, where you get the news shapes your opinions. And it's clearly a narrative, whether you're watching right-wing networks or left-wing networks, there's a narrative there that's being said. And the only way to really get the full picture and to understand what people who don't believe the same things you do actually think about an issue is to see where they're getting their information and see what narratives they're seeing. Because if you're not exposed to that, and you aren't exposed to that, if you're living in the CNN bubble, you have no clue what conservatives think about anything, apparently. If you're not exposed to other things, how you are at the mercy of the people that run these networks. Your perception of reality is being shaped by the people in these big, gigantic corporate media headquarters. It's not up. You're not making up your own mind. You might think you are, but in reality, your perceptions are being shaped by those people. So reach out, learn new things. You don't have to agree with it, but at least take the time to reach out and see what other people are saying, get new perspectives, and that will help you better understand the world and better understand, at the very least, the people who don't agree with you. And at the end of the day, convincing other people to believe the things that you believe is really what policy and politics is all about. So if you care about those things, you should be actively seeking to figure out what other people believe, and why they believe it, and watching these other TV networks, reading these other publications that are left-wing publications if you're a conservative. These are important things for people to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Or you could take the easy route and just watch Stopping Socialism TV, which you should subscribe to right here on YouTube, Stopping Socialism TV. You can find our content on stoppingsocialism.com. You can find a lot of our content shared across various social medias, whether it's Facebook, Stopping Socialism. We have a Parler account. We have Instagram, pretty much everything. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook, Parler, and Socialist Twitter.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.